Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Samdi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host. Hi, Juan. Thanks for stopping by today.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne. I'm totally appreciative of the opportunity to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, especially since we're talking about a great topic, credit, especially bad credit at that, which can lead to disqualifications for mortgages and car loans, as well as increasing insurance premiums and interest rates. In some cases, unfortunately, it can even prevent you from getting a job. Before we get into all the information you have to share with us today, let the community know a little bit about your background and how credit repair became your passion.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Juan Anderson. I go by Juan the Credit Doc because my main focus is credit health. A little bit about me. I'd say I'm someone who's been on the dark side of having what I like to call shady credit. Shady credit is that credit that doesn't allow you to do much of anything, and it gets you the side eye from places when they look at your credit reports. But I've spent, the last 5 years of my life really repairing my life, built my credit up from having filed 3 bankruptcies and, going through my entire 20s with bad credit. I just made it my passion and my life mission to really educate as many people as possible related to the do's and don'ts about credit health and how it can impact your quality of life in America. I've written a couple of books. My first one went bestseller, so I'm pretty excited about that. And it's kind of morphed into this entire credit repair or credit education consulting firm is what I like to call it. And I've been able to step off of my corporate job as a data analyst and do this full time and really educate and empower individuals all across the country. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow, a lot of accomplishments there, Juan. A lot of accomplishments with your book and being the doctor for credit.
Thank you.
Juan, there's been a lot of times when I've had to place my work expenses on my personal credit card. If I didn't have good credit, that would have definitely impacted my success in that role. Do you find that a lot of professionals don't understand why credit is so important for someone who wants to succeed in the workplace?
Absolutely. And I think that what you provided, Marianne, was the perfect textbook example of how credit can directly impact your profession. But yeah, I think that a lot of people just don't realize how much of a significance credit can play a part in your job, in your profession. And even to take it a step further, I always think about like people who are directly in like direct sales roles and how your first impression is everything. And if you don't have the good credit to go out here and get yourself a good car at an affordable rate, that's going to possibly have a lasting impression on your prospective client. And although we don't like to think of things in that term, those do have an impact. Or, if a job that you're going after, if they do run your credit to, qualify you for a position, which is the case with most, upper level management jobs, especially when we're talking about, the financial industry, or even you needing security clearance for some jobs, credit can have a major impact on that. And if it's in bad shape, then it can kind of knock you out of the box. So absolutely.
Early on in my career, that really disheartened me because I never knew that not having good credit could prevent me from getting a job that I wanted. But after working side by side with recruiters at some of my past jobs, I learned that could really be a detriment to your progress.
Absolutely. Because what people don't realize is that they're not necessarily looking at the scores per se, but they're looking at your patterns, they're looking at your behavior. And whether we want to realize it or not, as adults, we have grade cards, just like we were in school. And sometimes our credit reports, in addition to like our resumes and, references and things like that, can be looked at as a tool to determine how responsible you are. Do you pay your bills on time? Do you have a lot of debts? And if you are someone who is irresponsible, companies sometimes will look at you as a higher risk to do fraudulent, activity within the workplace to possibly gain monies to do your job. To pay off those bills and not necessarily do your job in the most ethical way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of different components really go into how credit can play a major part in the workplace, for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
And for someone who is in bad debts, let's talk about getting out of debt a little bit. I used to think that paying monthly minimum payments was enough to get out of any debt that I was in. For people who think making minimum payments on their debts is sufficient, what would you say to them?
I would say they're making a huge mistake, Marianne. and the reason why is because when you're making those minimum payments, especially when you're dealing with cards that have, interest, rates attached to them, which most cards and most loans have APRs attached. Most things are not 0%. But a bulk of your minimum is really going to be going towards that interest. So you're really just kind of chipping away very small, at a very minimal rate, the principal balance of what's being owed. So I always tell individuals to, focus on paying more than the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I like to call them chunk payments. Whatever your financial situation will allow you to make is what really should be paid towards credit card debt specifically, because those minimums can keep you paying on a credit card for 10, 15 years if you're paying the minimum and the balance is high enough. So it's just not worth it.
Just not worth it. Thanks for that.
Not worth it.
I know also, I keep saying me because this really resonates with me, this whole credit situation and how I was misinformed in my younger years.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have tons of credit cards. I just thought, it was just free money. I don't have any money, but I can just borrow this money, pay my minimum payments, and I'm just like free. And how many credit cards would you say is the amount that you need to have?
That's a great question. I really think it truly depends on your lifestyle. And I'll say and I'll kind of give you an example of what I mean by that. I definitely think that a person should have a couple of, top tier cards. And when I refer to those, I'm talking, a Visa, MasterCard. Amex is a great charge card to have, but you definitely need to have, I'd say, at least 2 to 3 of, cards like, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a person who does, indulge in some of the shopping, in this, again, this is going to all relate to your mindset and your responsibility and really having that discipline. I think if you find yourself frequenting more department stores, fairly often, then you will want to make sure that you have a card to those stores. I know a lot of women, they love Lane Bryant, so you probably would be in your best interest to have a Lane Bryant account. Mm-hmm. Or if you shop at Ann Taylor, or if you shop at TJ Maxx very often, just because you're missing out on some of those discounts and rewards that really come as an added incentive of you having those credit cards there. But just make sure that with those credit cards, you're not spending more than what you would spend in cash. So that way you don't get yourself into trouble. Yes. Yes. And the good thing about those store cards, that I always tell people is, in most cases, you can pay your store card right in the store. After you make your purchase, a lot of times these stores will have, use your credit card today, save 10, 20%. Well, use the card, get the discount, and then pay it off. And you've saved yourself some money, and you're racking up reward points. That'll kind of be of a benefit to you down the road. So.
Right. So you have to use those cards strategically, not a replacement for money you don't have.
Absolutely, because as you mentioned earlier, as it relates to credit cards being sometimes looked at as free money, and it's not.
Mhm.
It's we've all heard of the term OPP, other people's property. I like to
Right.
I like to
You
use the
down with
term
OPP?
OPM.
Right.
Yeah, you know me. But no, it really, I tell people, think of it in that sense and then use the acronym OPM. This is all credit relates to OPM, other people's money.
Mhm.
And if you keep that mindset, if you remember that, you'll remember, this is somebody else's money. I've got to be on my best behaviors with it because if not, it's going to damage my credit report. I don't want my credit report and my report card messed up.
Right. Excellent tip.
Yeah. Hmm.
Juan, I was reading a report and it said that 1 in 5 Americans are shocked to find errors on their credit report. What are
Hmm.
some credit report mistakes that might be damaging to someone's score?
It's a great question.
Thanks.
I would say, as it relates to errors, misbalances. So, I mean, missed credit limits. So your credit limit may be higher on one card than it's actually showing on the credit reports. Or if you maybe have some accounts that are listed, they may be listed as the wrong type of account. So you may have an installment loan that's maybe showing as a type of a credit card or vice versa. The balances could be reflected incorrectly. You could have inquiries, invalid addresses, old accounts that should not even be on the report. And sometimes you may run into the instance of, especially if you're a child who has the same name as a parent, you could run into having your parents' account showing on your credit reports and
Mm.
vice versa. So that's why it's really important to really always be paying attention to um, exactly the information that's being reported on the credit reports, open dates, date of last activity. So all of those different things do play a factor as far as inaccuracies that can impact or improve your credit reports.
How frequently should the general person check their credit report?
Well, you're speaking to someone like me about that question. I'm going to be a little bit more biased because I check mine constantly,
Mhm.
probably every week. But I'd say, on average, a person really needs to check their reports. I'd say once a month. It's very
Mm.
easy to do. There's so many different softwares and free options out here that'll allow you the opportunity to at least see what accounts are being reported. I mean, you got the Credit Karmas, and there's some credit cards that actually will give you your credit profiles and credit reports. Don't necessarily need to depend on those as it relates to the actual scores, but just peek at least once a month to see what accounts are reporting and how they're reporting.
Okay. Now, you don't check your personal credit report daily, right? You just do that for your clients?
Well, I would, because credit is like an obsession for me. I would say I probably am checking it a few times out of the week. And I know that nothing is changing, but I just know how fast things can change
Right.
on your report. So it is one of my things that I do check very frequently with mine. But with my clients, I'll check them. In most cases, I do like monthly repair. So I'll be, challenging items and, helping them to, improve in certain areas monthly. But I make sure that they have all given me their Credit Karma profile,
Mhm.
login information, so that way I can go in and check it at a weekly level, so I can see those weekly changes in activity. So yeah.
I've heard some people say that if you check your credit report too often, it could actually hurt your credit score. Is that a myth?
Definitely a myth.
Okay.
I would say that there's really no negative impact whatsoever as it relates to your reports. You checking it. If that's the case, then I'd have a very low 200 credit score.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because you do it every day. You're at credit score 0 right now.
Exactly. Now,
Okay.
going out and applying for credit and having other people look at your credit, that will impact your credit score. But you looking at it yourself, not at all. Especially if you're using a free software like Credit Karma. And like I said, some of your credit card companies, they'll give it to you. And there's different monitoring services that will allow you access to look at it, pretty frequently.
Okay. Um, Juan, I know you've heard that we've got a lot of children who are in serious debt due to college expenses. If we
Mhm.
had a parent in the community that had a child with a lot of debt, what's the best way that they can help as a parent, if any?
Well, now the one of the main ways that the parent can help, which isn't very attainable for a lot of us, is to pay the debt off and then have the child pay them. But that's just not the American way. That's not
Right.
really
I
what.
wish I had that type of parent when I was growing up.
But I think that the main thing that parents can do is really try to educate their kids, because college tuition is astronomical at this point. I mean, we're talking 150, $200,000 for a degree.
Hmm.
And I think that just really instilling the education, letting your kids know, hey, if you got to take out loans, if we have to do this, that's fine, but not taking out the refund checks, because they're a trap. Not going out here and racking up the credit cards because, a lot of times these companies, they prey on the ignorance, especially of our younger generation that's coming up and then not knowing the do's and don'ts about credit. And they're throwing them these credit cards. And, when you're a kid, I know when I was young, 18, 19, I looked at it like free money, like, hey, I can just go
Yep.
spin this up. And you don't really think about the lasting effect that that's going to have down the road, when you are ready to buy a home, when you are ready to get a car or get an apartment, how it's going to negatively impact you, excuse me. Um, so really it's going to be about the education. But unfortunately, as you and I know, some things have to be learned through trial and error.
Right.
So no
Right.
matter how much you tell a kid, sometimes we're going to do what we want to do.
Hmm.
But as long as you planted those seeds, you can always kind of come back to finding a way out of the situation.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Um,
Thank you.
then you've got the actual parents or the adults who are in a lot of debt. Forget the children. The adults are in debt. And some of them are thinking, is there hope for me? What can I do today? Tell them what they can do today, Juan.
First and foremost, you have to own it. You got to take responsibility. I'm all about accountability. I tell my clients that all the time. There's going to be some things that you're going to have to pay, you're going to have to settle, especially if they're even charge off accounts and things like that. But if you find yourself in a lot of debt, don't get overwhelmed. There's, you didn't get into this a massive debt overnight, so you're going to have to more than likely dig yourself out little by little. Focus small and build up. I'm very big on Dave Ramsey's strategy of the snowball approach to paying off debt. And if you find that you're someone who is just in over your head and you don't see a way out, everything's crashing, down, and you're getting calls and you just are not seeing a way out of your situation, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. And there's laws in place. There's bankruptcy options. There's state repayment plans that will allow you the option to kind of, restructure your finances and pay an affordable monthly amount. That'll really help you get back on your feet. But I think that a lot of people, they always hear the word bankruptcy and they're like, oh my God, that's the worst thing that can happen and I shouldn't do that. But unfortunately, in some cases, when you're in over your head too much, it's a way out. It's an ugly way out, but it is a way out.
Right.
Um, and then, once you do find yourself, crawling to the surface, don't go out into mass new debt. Don't
Right.
do that. I mean, you find people they'll pay off a credit card, and they'll feel so accomplished, and then they'll go run it up, or
Right.
they'll do a consolidation loan and pay off all of their credit cards, and they start using the credit cards again.
Right.
No, you got to understand, like you got to put yourself in a position that you can be financially free. You can have the best credit health possible, and it's going to come through the proper mindset. And that's really the mindset that I try to instill in people.
Right. I used to be in some debt way back in the day. And when I got
Mhm.
out, I ripped shredded every single credit card, and I only deal with one credit card these days because
Hmm.
if I let myself, I think I can be a shopaholic.
Oh yeah.
So
Yes, and they make it so easy.
I've had to tame my behavior seriously. So I don't want to go
Hmm.
down that road again.
Because it's hard to come out of it, once
It
you get in
really
it, then
is.
it's like everything's like, oh my God, like what did I do to myself? And then you
Yeah.
find where it's like and then you get people who are so in over their head, they'll just not do anything. They'll just forget it and walk away from everything because they're
And
just so overwhelmed with it.
you know what's interesting, Juan? It's because I'm thinking back to how this has impacted me in the past. When you're young, right, really young,
Hmm.
you think, okay, I'm going to use this charge card, and maybe my balance is, I don't know, $1,000. You're like, $1,000 is no big deal. I'll pay that off in no time. But the thing is, when you start making these minimum payments and you don't go over that, that $1,000 within months becomes 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, and then one day you see this big bill, and you're like, well, how did this happen? Because originally I only had $1,000 worth of debt.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why you really can't, because, yeah, like I was saying earlier, and when we kind of first mentioned it, these companies you'll pay $30, $40 a month, but you're going to be paying on that for literally years,
Years,
literally.
years.
And you calculate that over the course of, you making your payments. You're probably going to be paying, if you're just paying the minimum, you're going to be paying three, four, maybe even five times what you initially borrowed. So
It's a
it
great
kind of,
business.
yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I think that a lot of times these companies play on, well, I think in most cases they play on people's ignorance of them just not knowing, and they're making it so easy for you to get into debt. It's so easy to get into a huge amount of debt and then think that you're okay because you can make your minimums when in actuality you're really in over your head. You don't even realize it.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
Juan, it was really great getting the 411 on all things credit today. However, before we go, tell the community the best way to follow you to get more info about credit and credit repair.
Absolutely. I'm very active on social media. Instagram, I go by the name at Shady Credit because that's what I used to have. Um, Also Facebook, Juan the Credit Doc. You can reach out to me via my website, www.juanthecreditdoc.com. If you just Google me, Juan the Credit Doc, I'll pop up. I'm all over the internet. And LinkedIn, of course, Juan Anderson. So yeah,
All right.
it's been a
Thanks.
pleasure. Yes.
It's been a pleasure here as well. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you, Marion. I appreciate you so much.